This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Karl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Karl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
The law of attraction states that everything is energy and that like attracts like. True spirituality states that the only true reality is that of oneness, unity, and unconditional love and forgiveness. Together, these two are attached at the hip and perform a beautiful symbiotic dance together. Hi, I'm Karl Gruber, author of the brand new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship. This is a book that will show you how to build a rock-solid personal foundation based on unchanging, eternal, universal truth that shows you how to become a consistent co-creator with the universe to create the life you love to live and live to love. Get your copy today of my new book, True Spirituality and the Law of Attraction, a beautiful symbiotic relationship, and learn how to manifest the life you truly desire to be living. Now available as an ebook or paperback on Amazon. Do you want to know, really know, what lies beyond the 3D veil of the physical world you perceive? If so, then you are certainly in the right place. This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment. I'm your host, Karl Gruber. Now, this is a show that meets and talks one-on-one with the top experts, teachers, masters, and purveyors in the areas of spirituality, metaphysics, and enlightenment. And by the way, don't forget that you can now not only watch this show on YouTube, but you can also watch it on your home TV on New Reality TV. Just click the link below in the show notes to find out more. Now, today our guest here on episode 221 is Kara Goodwin. She is a spiritual guide, energy healer, and author devoted to helping people awaken to their divine nature and live in alignment with their soul's purpose. I love that already. Now, her journey began in the corporate world where she spent over 15 years in IT and consulting, and despite professional success, she felt unfulfilled and dejected, and it wasn't until a series of personal challenges and tragedies that led her to meditation that helped her to reconnect to her true essence. Now, she is on the path of a spiritual nature with a mission to help you live with more clarity, purpose, peace, and fulfillment. And boy, do we need that in this world. Plus, not only is she the author of the book, Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living, and she is the host of the super popular Soul Elevation podcast. So with that, welcome, Kara, to World Awakenings.
Thank you, Karl. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for having me on.
Well, it's always fun to have another podcaster on. You have a really awesome podcast of like-mindedness like this show. But also what you do, I like to dive in here. And so let's find out here. You seem to have followed a similar path that many of my guests have, and that is one of getting burned out on their job in the corporate world. What happened with you?
Well, yes, I was a part of the corporate world, and just like you said in the intro, I was very successful. I remember referring to it even as I was going through it that it was the golden handcuffs, right? Because I could tell that it was really hard to keep everything going. It wasn't really leading me to fulfillment, but it was really hard to walk away. And I actually ended up having some grace come through where my husband got an opportunity to have a job in Italy.
Oh,
And I had been very back and forth about my own career because, like I said, I was very successful in my company. I worked for a major, major company, and I was a young mother, working mother, with young kids, and they were good about trying to work with me when challenges came up. That things just came up. I had three animals, and um, like things happen with your house and all of this. And my husband really wasn't in a position to be the one to take over when the personal things needed taken care of. So I really was burning the candle at both ends, and when this opportunity came up for his job, it really gave me the opportunity to step away. That was how that happened. Because when we moved to Italy, we didn't have any network, and neither of us really wanted to like hire somebody to do what I would do, like take them to school. The whole lifestyle changed because we were living in a city versus the suburbs. And again, we had relied a lot on family and babysitters and things like that, with both of our careers going a million miles an hour. And it was like, we have no idea what is going on in this country, in this culture. Like it was like, we don't have anybody to fall back on. And so I stopped working then. But 2 years into that stint is when the personal challenges came through. So I spent 2 years just being immersed in the culture, in the expat community, working, helping out at my kids' school, and really just kind of breathing for a change, really just not having to be burning the candle at both ends, as I said. Um, but I also, when I look back, I'm like, okay, I was just kind of skating on the surface of everything, and even when I was working, I was kind of just skating on the surface of life, never really able to get into the depth of my being that I was craving. And then even when I got the time, I got the gift of time, I didn't really take that time to explore, the depths of my being. Um, but 2 years into our time there, we just had a series of things happen within our family that really pulled the rug out from under us. It started with the suicide of my sister-in-law, and she was one of my best friends, and she was just like 3 weeks away from getting married. She had two young children. It was heartbreaking and shocking. And we knew that she was depressed and that she'd been struggling with depression, but it was still like a major shock. Um, Very shortly after that, our dog died. Then my stepdad ended up having surgery on his brain stem, which is a very delicate procedure. We didn't know his health was deteriorating. Luckily, he's doing well now. My mother-in-law was hit by a motorbike as she crossed the street, ended up in the hospital recovering from that. And then my stepmom had been managing she had a heart virus. She'd been managing that for years with diet and exercise, and was kind of this marvel. Like, her doctors were like, you've got to tell people about what you're doing because it's so great. Well, all of a sudden she sort of just got very sick very fast, went into the ICU, and went to the top of the heart transplant list, and ended up having a heart transplant that saved her life. So all of that happened in 7 months, Carl,
wow.
7 months. And so I started to just feel like my like my house was built on sand or something like that, um, and I felt that I really needed meditation. That was kind of what I landed on. I landed on meditation. It was something that I had tried a few times before, but never really felt like I got anything from it or that I was doing it right. But with this, like with my life just being in disarray, I decided that I wanted to get a teacher and really learn meditation. And so I learned from actually a spiritual organization. It was like a yogic lineage. Well, Paramahansa Yogananda's methods. He's the author. I know you know him, but he's the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, which most people recognize the name of that book. But he passed away in 1952, but his teachings live on. And there are a couple of organizations that are still dedicated and devoted to sharing his teachings and his methods. And so that was the organization I learned from online. And, but even though that was because he was a very religious, not religious, but very spiritual person. And I was interested in the teachings that he's left behind, but I also was kind of not real. I was just kind of curious about it, but I didn't really want to pray before my meditation. I didn't really want to get myself involved in the spiritual side of it. And so I tried to keep everything very secular. And which is just funny because I was learning from monks, so they were kind of like, that was part of the teachings, was like, pray, here's a prayer to say before you start. But the names on the names that we were praying to was this guru lineage that I was kind of like, I will follow along, but like when I was meditating on my own, I didn't necessarily want to do that. And so I really approached meditation from a very secular standpoint. That's why I'm sharing that, because it was like, I just need to feel better. I want to know how to calm myself. I want to feel more secure. And it was through the ongoing practice of meditation that I started to open up more organically to the spiritual side of it, because now that is so important to me. And that's when I started going deeper, that kind of depth that I was talking about missing, how I felt that I was kind of skating the surface of life and avoiding going deeply deeply into knowing myself, deeply into connecting with anything, kind of multidimensional within myself. I wasn't nurturing that. And it was through the practice of meditation and through experiences like perceiving light descending from above, but through my body. So my eyes were closed. I was meditating and started to feel and see light it's as though it was coming from, like the very top of my head, and then just coming into my brain and into my inner sight. And it was so warm and so beautiful and so mysterious that I burst into tears during my meditation. It just felt so powerful and so poignant. So I had a few different experiences like that. Another one being that I was meditating and I started to see in my inner sight this spiraling galaxy. So it was as though I was looking at it from a distance. I was seeing this rotation, and it looked like a cluster of stars, a cluster of points of light just rotating. And I am not, especially back then, I was not really into space, not a sci-fi person. And I was really confused by that. Now, as I've gone along my journey, that was many years ago, as I've gone along my journey, I have understood more the role of interdimensionals, extra dimensionals, ETs, the what we would call aliens. I didn't even believe in them back then, and they certainly, I didn't have any frame of reference of why they would show up in a meditation or why something related to that would show up in meditation. Fast forward many years, and I started to understand the phenomenon and even feel within myself, oh, I think I'm a starseed. I have had connections and experiences that seem to involve like off-planet or non-human intelligence. But at the time, it was just this mysterious thing, like, why? I have no context for this. I don't know why anybody would see this. I don't know. And I'm not really, I would never call myself a clairvoyant. And I certainly wouldn't have back then. That's not like how I typically perceive things. I have had some very, very powerful clairvoyant experiences since then, but I still wouldn't say that I am clairvoyant necessarily. So it was all very interesting. And And so that's kind of painting the picture there of the early times of how I got to where I am and the role that meditation played.
Wow, you've really lived the human journey so far, and there's more to
Yeah.
come. But let's go back. So you lose the golden handcuffs, which is an amazing term that I haven't heard before. I like that. And you move to Italy. Now, when all of these personal family tragedies happen, were you still in Italy? And then you probably had to come back to the States several times, and I'm guessing you finally decided to move back to the States because of that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So my husband's family is actually in England. And so with the things that were happening with them, we were closer to them, but still it was, a few hour flight. And then my family was here in the States. And so, yeah, we couldn't even really very easily be with everybody as these tragedies were happening and as everybody was trying to navigate like a new normal. So that did have an extra element, added an extra dimension into all of that. And then we were there for another 2 years before we moved back to the US.
Yeah, real stressful situation in a beautiful place. Heck, I'm a wild and crazy bachelor. If I lived in Italy, I'd just sit on the balcony drinking wine and going, Buongiorno.
Yes.
But I'm curious too. You found meditation while you were in Italy, and you were studying with monks in Italy with your meditation.
Well, I found an online program that's actually kind of part of the journey that I write about in my book, because I told you that I was kind of maybe agnostic, not really, not like super. Didn't really even know what I believed, if I believed anything. I think, and when I look back on it, I think, I don't know that I ever would have said that I don't believe in God, but I didn't feel that I was like a critical part of God's plan or on his radar or worthy of anything because I hadn't been, because of my actions in not trying to have any sort of relationship, but also just I figured there you're probably born that way or you're not. You're either like a sage or you're a regular person, and I was just a regular person. So I kind of just felt like I was just, kind of under the radar. Um, and of course, with as my spiritual understanding has grown, I do understand we are all known and seen by God, absolutely. Um, but I was walking home from taking my kids to school one morning and just recognizing like all of the things that were happening and that it just felt overwhelming. And it also felt like, what's next? This is there. It just seemed like every time I turned a corner, there was something else and it was huge. And, so I was kind of like having this conversation in my head and I was like, I don't know if you know me, and talking to God, and I don't know if I know that people have worse problems, even with me having these problems, I know there are worse problems out there. But I feel like maybe meditation could be a way that I've always felt drawn to meditation. And if meditation would be a way to help me through this time, and that's a good idea, then lead me to a, a solution, a teacher, or, open the door for me and make it so that I don't miss it. And let it be in English because I did speak Italian, but like I had actually tried a meditation group that somebody in one of my language classes had recommended, but it was in Italian. And of course, you keep your eyes closed while you're meditating. And there were just so many times where we'd be in silence and I would have translated what they said, but then we were in silence and I'd have to kind of like open my eyes, like, is everybody done? Like, did I misunderstand what they said? Is everybody done? And they're just waiting for me to open my eyes. Same thing happened. I took several yoga classes while I was there and I had the same insecurities where I'm like, I think that we're just supposed to hold this pose and keep our eyes closed. But what if everybody is like out of the pose, waiting for me to come out of it and open my eyes? And so I was like, so please lead me, please guide me. and let it be in English. And so I did find an online program that's a whole other story because I was looking at Yogananda's organization, Self Realization Fellowship, that he created while he was alive. And the only program was a mail in program. And my mail was so unreliable that I had wedding invitations that never made it to me. Deliveries were really hard. And it was going to be like, I really wanted to dive into this, and I didn't want it to be one of those things that I had this extra hurdle of I'm not receiving my lessons and now I have to pay again. And it was so archaic. And again, I knew my mail system was unreliable. So that really felt like a closed door. And then the other alternative was to go to California and take a class for like, I don't remember, 2 weeks, something like that. And here I've got my two young kids. I've got my husband who is most of his job required travel all through Europe. And I was like, I literally cannot do that. I cannot travel halfway across the world and I couldn't stop my life. And so I kind of closed it and I was like, all right, I guess I'll do this when we move back to America. But I was like, I don't think we're moving back for another couple of years. And one day, because I just kept going back to the same, website and seeing if there was something I'd overlooked. And eventually I got the idea, just Google, like, so, Google Paramhansa Yogananda meditation or something like that. And I found another organization that they had a whole robust online program. They had several courses and several ways for people all over the world to be able to engage with these practices. And it was like when I still remember so vividly doing this Google search, finding it, clicking on it, and it felt like the doors flung open. And it was like, I mean, I remember thinking like, oh my God, this is it. And so they had I think it was like a 10-week learn to meditate program or something. There were people from all over the world who were participating, and it was exactly what I needed when I needed it.
Wow, that's pretty awesome story. Going back though to when you were in a corporate career, unfortunately, most of the world follows that same path of a career that is intense, demanding, burdensome. Why is it you think that people who some people don't get fed up with it and continue to lead this life even though it's unfulfilling? And why do some people are the golden handcuffs permanent on them?
It's such a good question. And I think it's so nuanced. It's so layered for different people because there really are people who they feel that they don't have a choice or, for whatever reason, whether it is, life is so busy and they've got a lot of demands and the last thing that they have time for right now is to go and do some job searching to find something that's more aligned. There are many, many reasons, and one of the reasons could be that they actually are where they're supposed to be right now. Um, One of the things that I want that I love that you're bringing forward that relates back to my story is that I felt that life was, I was letting life lead me by the nose. And so I had a lot of demands and I really wasn't allowing myself to explore that spiritual connection. Now, this was 10 plus years ago. Um, the world was different back then. There were fewer people awake. There were still plenty of people who were awake, but we have such a much bigger awakening community now. I didn't have a lot of people that I knew who went against the grain or had a different way of thinking or were modeling that, you didn't have to be part of this machine. So that's part of it. But the other piece is that I, even though I felt this deficiency within this spiritual kind of desert within me, that I wasn't getting the fulfillment from all of the external things that I got myself into that I thought was what I was supposed to do. The material things and all of that, it was just, I didn't really question it. Um, and I wasn't prioritizing. I just wasn't prioritizing. I wasn't choosing it. I didn't really know what I was missing. Now, if people are listening to this podcast, they're already past that point, but they may still be in jobs where they're feeling that golden handcuff and those golden handcuffs. So I do feel that there's not one answer in terms of everybody needs to vacate that lifestyle and vacate the big corporate. If you find yourself in this situation, you've got to find work that's going to be different. I wouldn't say that because it very well may be that they are exactly where their soul is supposed to be right now. We need awakened people who are school teachers and who are hairdressers and policemen and